Recently, Insight presented a seminar on the value of user research for the medical device industry to a Fortune 500 device manufacturer. Today, we are going to take a look at 3 excerpts from this presentation which focuses on mitigating risk through effective user research.
We say a lot of times to people, many things have to go right in order for a product to be successful. And there's a lot of things that can torpedo or sink an effort. And so it's very important when we're doing research to be pretty liberal in defining who we consider a stakeholder, for a certain product or a device or a service. The merits of a concept or a proposal need to be debated from a wide variety of perspectives. And the earlier you can do this, the better off that you are, because you can identify problems, and sometimes problems that are actually going to kill a program. You can identify and define those earlier on, before you've sunk a lot of time, effort, money, and resources into doing something. So when you're taking a look at maybe a diagnostic device that's used in a clinic, certainly make sure that you talk to the nurse who's going to use that. And probably also makes sense to talk to the physician who might use that, and maybe in a different way than the nurse. But you also have to talk to the sales rep. Sometimes the sales rep is actually in the clinic room doing some of the on-site training, doing some of the work with the patient. We've seen that quite a lot. And so their input is incredibly valuable. But also thinking about the rest of the potential users, or even kind of soft users, if you will. So in some cases, a diagnostic device may interface with a practice scheduling system. Well, how would you know how to optimize that device and optimize the workflow for that nurse without also understanding what's at stake for the practice schedule, or a referring physician, or the folks that handle billing and reimbursement, or the patient perspective? So being pretty liberal with identifying and defining stakeholders can lead to a lot of really useful insight. Another aspect of mitigating risk that we want to talk to is by understanding that user research up front can go a long way towards providing greater fidelity around design requirements. And this is critical, because design requirements are great, they're necessary, they're useful, we're all used to working with them, but it's not enough just to have them. It's not enough just to create that list. You want to know as much about them as possible. So for example, a project that we worked on, this is a medical device that was used in the OR and in a clinic setting. And one of the requirements was that its design needed to support ease of transport and ease of storage. Makes sense, right? What does that mean? Well, our user research kind of pointed to many dimensions of portability and storage. So does it mean that it needs to be lifted from the floor onto a cart or a shelf? Does it mean it needs to be carried down a hallway manually with cords and peripherals hanging from it? Does portability mean it needs to be strapped to a 2-wheel dolly and wheeled across a parking lot? Or does it mean being stacked on a cart on top of other pieces of equipment and wheeled from room to room? Or does it mean being put in the trunk of the car? These are all use cases that we collected during user research, but you can see that the issue of transport and portability is much more complex than just a two-line entry onto a list of requirements. So you need to understand requirements contextually in order to mitigate the risk of misinterpreting them, leading to potential design features or potential design decisions that really don't have the desired impact that's going to be necessary for that product to succeed in the market. So a little bit about FDA requirements. So the FDA defines a design input as ensuring that you as a manufacturer maintain procedures to ensure that your design requirements relate to and address actual user needs. Inputs as defined by the FDA relate to human factors issues, and they involve any and all possible relationships between a user and a device and their environment. And that's critical because there are a number of different research methodologies that are in place and available to you, some not so strong as others. At Insight, our research methodology really emphasizes the idea of collecting data in the environment of use. So sometimes people use focus groups, sometimes people use surveys and phone conversations, and they can certainly get you information, but they're not a substitute for actually getting out in the environment and understanding all the richness and all the complexity that goes on between these interrelationships. There are also many dimensions to human factors. So when we think about solving for human factors as a way to set up a foundation for design requirements and design inputs, there's a lot of different ways to think about that. There's physical, there's cognitive, there's expectancies, so understanding how habits form, why those habits form, understanding how difficult they may be to break, understanding are we going to have to align our new device with existing habits, understanding mental models, ways people think about things, and then understanding that users are not all alike. So one user, maybe they're a very well-trained RN nurse clinician, is going to think very, very differently from maybe a hospital tech who doesn't have the educational background that person does, but maybe both of them have to use a device. They might be approaching it from a very, very different cognitive standpoint. These are some interesting excerpts from some of FDA guidance documents that we say all the time, but it's kind of nice to have the FDA do some of our marketing for us. And it just really hammers home the importance that the FDA places on developing strong design requirements. You know, the top line is very interesting. It's the single most important design control activity. It's also theoretically the least expensive, because ideally you're doing them early on before you've sunk a lot of money into commercializing something.